Okay, my name is Dov Charnowitz. I've gotten involved in these things really, I'll tell you like I said it over. I went to Rav Katz's Levaya. It was in the middle of the COVID situation, and they were about to bury him after his children and his grandchildren spoke. And I basically said that if this was any other normal time, there would be loads of Rabbanim and Gedalim here to speak about Rav Label, but I just could not tolerate him being buried without somebody from the community speaking as well. And therefore, I've learned from Rav Label and from Rav Shlomo Blumenkranz, these are two Rabbanim that have taught me that when Rabbanim or other people don't get involved, you got to learn to step up to the plate. And basically, that's what I've been doing. It's not something I do for Parnasa. It's not something I do for covet. It's something I do because there's no one else out there doing these things.
You've helped many people either stay married when they thought they're getting divorced and vice versa. Some people, okay, they have to get divorced. You've helped in that regard also, right?
Of course. The first option is always shalom bayis. As a matter of fact, it's very interesting. I couldn't remember. I remembered Rav Gestetner, which I'm sure we'll go into a little later, where they had a demonstration by his Besden last week. I never met him personally, but I do remember him calling me up, and he asked my wife and I to help a couple with shalom bayis. That was our only connection with him. Nothing to do with a divorce. I mean, obviously, I don't really know what happened at the end of the day.
So the fact that he called, that means you must have a name out there that you know what you're doing.
And like I said, we don't do this for Parnasa. We don't. My wife has an organization that helps families with disabled children. I'm in the wholesale food business, and because I went through the parsha myself, I learned where the holes are and what I needed to do to step into the plate. And to step up to the plate. And like I said, my contact with Rav Gestetner was just once or twice over a shalom bayis case where he sent us. Rav Label, by the way, Rav Katz also sent us shalom bayis cases, which is very interesting because he was someone who worked on it. But, you know, when a Rav goes about things in a particular way, a balabas can go things in a completely different way. One of my Rabbanim, a lot of times when I have to speak to the Reshivas in Lakewood or whatever else, he says, Dov, you'll get farther. Not because I'm giving a lot of money, nothing to do with that. It's just the mahalach of a balabas. He doesn't have to have the same environment of a Rav to a Rav.
So what do you want to say? You've been watching what's going on the last 2 months, and it's getting to a point, I think it's probably, is it fair to say, worse than ever? It's like, it's getting vicious. Like, it's like, do these people really want to help the situation, or are they just making things worse? What's going on?
Well, they're certainly making it worse. I don't know if it's worse than ever. It's more out there than before.
So it feels like it's worse.
It feels like it's worse. Also, we don't have leaders like we used to have in prior generations. When we had a Ramosha Feinstein, everybody knew his psak, and I'm willing to quote some of the things that Ramosha felt about this. But what I'd like to say, the first thing is that people forget the first bracha in the Torah. First bracha ever given in Torah. You ask someone, what's the first bracha ever given in the Torah? People look at you like, what are you talking about? That was the first bracha. They have a family. They have a Jewish family life. And like I tell people, just like a businessman, or there are multiple partners in a business, their interest is the success of the business. That is their first and foremost objective. The first and foremost objective in a marriage, once they have children, is their children. That is their investment. And I don't know anyone who could say that children are better off growing up in separate homes, with their parents being in separate homes, than in one home. And therefore, because we live in a world today where everything is disposable, people just figure, okay, we'll dispose this, we'll throw it out. I'm in the food business. People like microwavable stuff. Why? because it's instantaneous. Everybody wants an instant solution. And the reality is, somebody asked me a question last week. And the question was, there's a mitzvah of machzik rushasai, to remarry your wife. And it's considered a very big mitzvah. And somebody asked me, why such a mitzvah? I said, I don't know. Why such a mitzvah of wearing tzitzis? Half the mitzvahs in the Torah we don't know. And then I put some thought into it, and I came up with, we know that the biggest mitzvah in Klal Yisrael is v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. The second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of Ben Adam l'chavero. Therefore, the machzik rushasai is the epitome of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You tore apart a family because of your differences. You each didn't work on yourself. The fact that you can remarry her and that both of you are now working together towards your common interest of the children and of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to me that's the epitome of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. And I never really thought of it before somebody asked me this question last week.
Well, the question that's on really everyone's mind is what can be done to rectify what's going on? Because I think most people are reasonable. Most people mean well. They do good. People want to do the right thing. People are not evil. Most people want to do, but they feel helpless. They don't know what to do. So what would you advise someone who's in the parasha? You helped hundreds of people already.
I wouldn't say hundreds. Probably between 150 and 200 couples.
Okay. So correction over there.
But that's
a lot. But that's a lot more than the average person.
Yeah, well,
it's,
like I said, I know the average person. Just to think, the average person who never went through this should stay far away. The biggest cause of divorces and the problems that happen in divorces and why they turn into wars is because the average person sticks his nose in. The do-gooders. I call them the do-gooders of the community.
Like a lot of Rabbanim say, in the name of L'Shem Shemayim. Everybody walks around L'Shem Shemayim, but they're causing a lot of harm.
Okay, people are forgetting that L'Shem Shemayim means the Shemayim comes. I tell people that when a husband and wife get married, it's not a two-way partnership, it's a three-way partnership. We stand under the chuppah with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We understand that every child that's born to a family, there are three partners. There is the father, there is the mother, and then there is Hashem. When people say to me, well, the husband and wife both want a divorce, I say, okay, what does the third partner have to say? Where's the Rav? Who did you go to? Which I'll discuss towards the end of this thing. I did a number of years ago create a 5-point plan, which I believe would tremendously reduce divorce in the Frum community. Just to quote Rabbi Weiner, Rabbi Weiner says, yes, there is such a thing as divorce in the Torah. It's not an option, it's an escape hatch. When you can't fix anything else and there has to be some kind of way out, that's divorce. The problem is today people look at it as an option. Rav Leibel, I just understand that I'm quoting Rav Leibel because he was known for years and years to give chassan classes. He was the epitome of shalom bayis. He pushed people to stay together for the longest period of time. And I will tell you that if people used to call him up and say, I'd like to come speak to you about my marriage or my situation, the first thing he would tell them is, I'm not speaking to one of you. You both have to come down together. We've forgotten that concept. There's a concept that if you want to, or as my father says, when people say there are two sides to every story, I learned from my father, there's three sides to every story.
The truth.
So there's no way to determine the third side without speaking to the other two sides.
Right. And preferably when they're together, not one time here when it's a mistake a lot of people do.
Instead of trying to go about, I'll speak to this, I'll speak to that one. Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't have private time with one of the parties,
Right.
but it should start off initially with both parties so there's an equal balance.
Right.
And then it should continue with both parties, even if you're simultaneous. That's one thing. The other thing I do want to say is that I do know of a situation, one of the cases that, we spoke about the do-gooders before. Rav Label told one of the women who was getting, quote, help from the people in the community, he told her, these friends of yours that are giving you advice, at the end of the day, they're going to go back to their husbands, they're going to have their children, and they're going to have their life. And if you continue on this path that you're doing, you won't have a husband and you won't have your children. And I thought that was like pretty scary to say a woman won't have her children. Everybody kind of understands that's what happens. But Lamaisa, at the end of this case, she really didn't. Her husband ended up with custody, and unfortunately, she kind of walked out of the kids' lives. And it's very interesting how he saw that, but he saw that based on the behavior that he saw going on. You started off saying about what's going on out there now. People forgot that there's such a thing as halacha. It's pretty crazy that people don't refer to this first. First of all, people should understand. There's this misconception, and you yourself mentioned it to me when you first came. You were a little bit surprised that there's no din that you have to give a get. Because a woman says she wants out, doesn't mean she's entitled to a get. It doesn't exist in the Torah. That's a secular society. Now, if a woman has valid claims, everybody understands that the giving of a get is done by the man, just like the kedushin. The woman she chooses when you get married to accept or not accept. At one time, when it came to a get, the woman didn't even have to accept the get. The man could just throw it into her reshus, but it was changed years later. I believe it was Rabbi Gershon, I'm not 100% sure, but it was changed so that a woman must accept the get. You can't just throw it into her. However, everybody recognizes that both the beginning of a marriage and the end of a marriage is basically the husband proposing or asking the wife to marry him. And the same thing when the marriage breaks up, chas v'shalom, unfortunately. So for some reason, there's this concept that a woman is owed a get. That does not exist. Now let's talk about the proper ways. So right away they classify that every woman who says she wants out and she doesn't have her get immediately, she's an aguna. No such thing. It doesn't exist. If a woman wants out, she has a right to go to a Besden, and for Besden and for her to say, listen, my husband is not acting like a proper husband, and give whatever reasons it is, whether he's not taking care of his responsibilities or whatever else it is. And if the husband does not have any valid reasons that the Besden determines, not that the husband determines, then the Besden can paskin chayav legarish. He is obligated to give a get. When a Besden paskins chayav legarish, that he's obligated to give a get, and the man does not give the get, then he is an aguna. Then she is an aguna. Additionally, if she calls her husband to Besden and he refuses to come, the Besden can issue a seiriv against him, and eventually they can also issue a chayav legarish. He's not coming. This woman has issues that she would like to resolve, and he's refusing to deal with it. So let's first understand that there is no din that because a woman decides she would like to get divorced, all of a sudden a husband. And I will quote, this is the standard. And it's funny because YU and Ora and all these people who are big into this feminist thing where every woman's entitled to give a get. I went to a class given by, not Rav Hirsch, Rav Willig, many, many years ago. It was when I first experienced trouble in my marriage. This must have been well over 20 years ago. And he was giving a shiur, and this is what he said, and it's amazing. I actually have it on tape. I don't know why I taped it. I just wanted to get an education about the Parsha. And what he said was that, let's say a woman, family's married, and a woman says, you know what, I want to go to Montana and find myself. I don't want to be diapering babies anymore. I don't want to be taking care of children. So you can't force somebody to do something or to live in a certain situation. So he said it kind of jokingly, like, you know, if you don't give in to your wife, eventually your life becomes miserable. And he said, so eventually, you know, the situation's going to end up where there's going to be a divorce. He says, but let's say that they have $1 million in their bank account. And according to New York state law, there's division, equitable distribution, which means he's entitled to $500,000, she's entitled to $500,000. If he says to her, listen, I don't want to get divorced. We have children. I'd like you to continue to be their mother and my wife. I'd like to go forward with our lives. And she says, I don't want to hear of it. He doesn't have to pay $500,000 for the privilege of breaking up his family. Doesn't exist. And right away, she's called an aguna. He says that's not an aguna. I have that from him on tape, even though he is one of the Rabbanim who sign on Orah, which the way in which Orah functions is the complete opposite of that. Listen, I don't think that people get to be Rabbanim and Rosh Yeshivas by being stupid. You'll excuse me. I really don't. I would think that they didn't get to be a Rav or a Reshiva without learning Gemara. I believe that the machlokes in between the Tanaim and understanding that, if they can understand that, they can understand this. I'm sorry. So first of all, we understand there's no concept that a person has to give a get. Second of all, if and when a get has to be given, there's something called the Shulchan Aruch. In Even Ezer, there's something at the end. You can look it up. Don't trust me. It's called Seder HaGet, the order of the get. And there's a process. Just like people don't get married first after the first date because they see this beautiful woman and she sees this handsome guy and they just decide to get married. No, you speak about, do you want to have children? Do you want to be religious? There's a basis for your marriage and how you're going to live your life. When a divorce has to come about, there needs to be not only that basis, but even more, because you're talking about two separate households. Here, it's common sense that the two of you have to understand this is, yes, is there always going to be arguments up the road and new things come into everybody's life? Yes. And that's, a couple's supposed to work that out. However, if they can't work it out and there has to be a divorce, they certainly have to work out a plan of action for their children, which is their investment. So, additionally, when we said that, and just to go on that, based on the many cases that I've seen, there is absolutely no reason for a man to give a get first. If he does that, A, he's an idiot. Not because every woman is out to get him, chas v'shalom, but Even Ezer knows a little more. Understands that there's Seder HaGet. I explained this to somebody once, and he said, why are you helping this guy withhold a get from his wife. I said, I'm not helping him withhold the get. I just want the issues to
Yeah, you
be
hear
resolved.
this a lot, that you're protecting the abuser. That's the
No, it's-
the new game in town.
Yeah.
You're protecting the abuser.
So first of all, because there's allegations of abuse doesn't mean there is abuse. Number one.
Obviously, right?
We believe in a society innocent until proven guilty, but unfortunately things have changed a lot. Most of the time, when I said about there's no reason to give a get first, I started saying that somebody came over to me and told me and that you're helping this guy withhold the get. I said, no, not at all. I just want them to resolve the issues. And I explained to him how it's supposed to go about. He sees me the next morning after shul, and he comes over to me. He says, let me tell you what I learned from you. The Torah calls it Sefer Haget, not Shtar. Why? It's a book that has to be written, and the last page of the book is the get. Not that the man should be withholding anything because of the get, but that's the last page of the book. You don't get to the last page till you do the other pages beforehand. Additionally, in most cases, all cases, there's no get emergency that the woman must get a get right away. If there is a get emergency, then there's suspicion of a problem. That's a lot bigger than what this interview is about. But in most cases, especially when there are children involved and there's a family, there's no get emergency, which I'll get to that in my 5-point plan. Additionally, Ramosha has a psak that people are not familiar, that if a woman goes to secular court and she's a moredes, that the husband doesn't even need to get a heter. People are against this concept of a heter. Let's understand, we live in a Torah world, we live in a Jewish world, and in the Ashkenazi community since Rabbeinu Gershon, a man is only allowed one wife. However, there are circumstances where a man can take another wife, and they just don't want to hear about it, society. Okay, so basically Avram Avinu and Yaakov, they were like really nasty people. I mean, these people would be protesting against them. No, there is a concept that a man can have multiple wives that has changed in the Ashkenazi community since Rabbeinu Gershon, but nevertheless, Ramosha has a clear psak that if a woman is a moredes and does certain things, that a man can just take another wife. Of course, it's not his choice. He's got to go to a Besden, present the facts, and then the Besden will give him a heter nesuin for the ability to take on another wife. While we're going into the Besden process, which is really the middle point, I put this into a category of 5 subjects, basically. Let's go into the halachas of going to secular court. Open up a Shulchan Aruch, and I promise you, the words that it uses for going to secular court, it says basically, Charav Gadaf al Torahs Moshe Rabbeinu. You're stepping and spitting on the Torah of Moshe. You're basically saying halacha is meaningless, and the secular laws are better. It is the strongest lashon in the world. We're not even getting into Masira and being maser on another yid, which that is unheard of, which halacha says that if a person, afilu bizman hazeh, even in these times, if a woman threatens to be an informant or to make up charges, you're allowed to kill that person, afilu bizman hazeh, even if they don't do it, but they threaten. People don't open up a Shulchan Aruch and see what it says black and white about Masira and about going to secular court. A lot of people, and this is an issue, a lot of people say, well, the Batei Dinim are corrupt. A rabbi hangs out a shingle and this and that. Listen, it is very difficult, especially in the New York area, to find a good Besden. It is possible, but it's difficult. However, the example that I use is if you found out that all the hashgachas were corrupt, that doesn't give you a heter to eat tarfus. Period. You can't eat treif because the hashgachas are corrupt. It's your responsibility to eat vegetables or whatever else. If you are not satisfied or haven't been able to find the proper Besden, sit down with a third party and work it out or whatever else. But that doesn't give you the right to go against Shulchan Aruch by going to secular court. Additionally, when we spoke about giving the get first, there's no judge in his normal mind in a secular world that would grant the divorce first. Give the get first. The judge will say, okay, I hereby declare you divorced without discussing anything. Spend the next 10 years of your life fighting about it. It doesn't exist. There's no common sense to it. But nevertheless, the feminists brought this agenda up, and for some reason, people are swallowing it. Additionally, the first responsibility of a Besden should be to push shalom bayis. Clearly, because you're going to make a few $100 or today maybe $1,000, whatever it is on a get, there's a reason because someone comes to you. A number of years ago, when Raveli Melech Bluth was alive, Baruch Hashem, he was a top Talmud of Rav Moshe Feinstein, and I had a husband and wife who both wanted divorce, and they were going to him. And somebody asked me to please intervene. I met with him. I told him, I said, listen, this couple has no business getting divorced. They have a child together. I don't see them going anywhere. He got married for the first time in his mid-40s. She's on her third marriage. There's no reason for it. When they came in, and I said, additionally, my wife and I tried working with them, and I also sent them to a Rav, and they didn't really listen and follow along anything towards making the marriage work, like we spoke before about marriages being disposable. Raveli Melech Bluth met with them and told them, I will not do a divorce. And he gave them the name of a therapist and told them to come back in a number of weeks. They came back in a number of weeks, and he told them, I see no divorce here. So you see that even when you come to somebody who's a Talmud Chacham, he was the top Talmud of Rav Moshe Feinstein, that he recognizes that divorce is not always the solution, just because people want to, even if both parties want to divorce. So a Besden, the first thing that they should be trying to do, a Besden should be representing Klal Yisrael. The first thing they should try to do is keep a family together. Many years ago, I went to Reb Reuven Feinstein and I said to him, listen, I have an idea. You know, the Batei Dinim, it's not that they're corrupt. They're just problematic because this one calls them and that one calls them, and they get involved with all different things. And I proposed the idea to set up an administration of a Besden run by Balabatim, who are not interested in money, who are not interested in politics. They will follow the protocols of the Rabbanim, but the Rabbanim should just sit in the Yeshivas Besden. They shouldn't have to get involved in the outside thing. I mean, he jokingly said to me, when you find Balabatim that listen to Rabbanim, let me know. But that was my idea. Okay. I'm going to the fourth thing, which was today's day and age. You asked me about what's going on. And I mentioned before, I never personally met Rav Gestetner. He called us about a shalom bayis case. But I saw the way in which he went about things. And they had a demonstration. Last week, they decided to make a protest against Rabbi Gestetner. My experience with him... And
got to clarify for the viewers when I say they.
Okay, well...
Explain who they are so people understand very clear.
They are... the Aura people, the people, I will tell you, they know almost nothing in halacha. I've tried getting into a discussion with them, and I don't consider myself a maven in halacha, but because of what I deal with, I've learned some of these things, and these people are just ignorant when it comes to halacha. I even told somebody that next time they make this kind of demonstration, they should just bring a shas and really cover the floor with the shas and just step on it. And this way they're, at least you know up front. You know, I have this saying that, you know, at least when Reformed and conservative Judaism started, they said, Hine muchana mezuman. we're changing it. We're making a change. At least they were honest to say we're making a change. But to try and corrupt Yiddishkeit and make changes in halacha, and you're doing it in the name of halacha and chesed, it's a bunch of baloney. You got to know what you're doing. So understand that this protest was done primarily because Rav Gestetner put out a psak. There's been a lot of cases lately where they've had demonstrations and all kinds of getting, and they're forcing the guy to give a get. And under those circumstances, anyone who knows anything about Hilchas Gittin, that a get that's given out of force or not willingly, there's problems with the get. All Rabbi Gestetner did was put out a psak that there is a problem with these type of gittin. And these people want to protest. We need strength in our community. We need leaders in Klal Yisrael and Rabbanim to stand up for the right thing. We shouldn't have to wait till the FBI gets involved to straighten out a situation that should have been straightened out beforehand. The real reason for the protest was that Rav Gestetner came out with a psak that these gittin that were being forced is a problem, and instead they decided to hide it behind the Meir and Lana Kin divorce case from 17 years ago. Why a divorce case from 17 years ago came up last week? No, because they couldn't openly say, hey, we're against the fact that he came out with a psak, and that psak happens to be the halacha. So instead, they diverted it to a case where there is no get. There is no get for a number of reasons. If anyone would look up, they can find there are letters that the Besden sent to Lana Kin, what she needs to do in order to get the get. They weren't asking for anything outrageous. They were just asking to take down some of the false things that were going around and for her to resolve it, and she refused to. Besides the fact, one of the protesters said to me when I was demonstrating, they said, well, she doesn't have a get and it's 17 years. I said, well, he has a kid and he hasn't had contact with them for years. And they said, but the kid is over 18, he can make his own decision. I said, not for 17 years if he's been kept from his father. How's that called his own decision? For some reason, people believe, and I just want to give this, I use this as a mushal when people who have a hard time understanding the giving of the get. I like turning something into a very practical case. Someone comes to your house. Let's say your car was stolen last week or 2 weeks ago, and someone comes to your house for tzedakah, and you happen to go to the front door and you greet him and you see that he's driving your car. Do you have the right to say to him, I'm happy to give you tzedakah. I understand you're in a difficult situation, but please return my car to me first. My car was stolen. It's my car you're driving. What makes people think that you can take someone's children and then he has to give a get anyways? It's absurd. That's part of one of the things that certainly has to be resolved. Listen, I'm not saying that every case the woman is the guilty party, but nevertheless, if a woman wants a get, just like I use the mushal of the guy who comes to your house with your stolen car, it's reasonable for you to say, I'll give you tzedakah, I'm willing to help you out.
Give me my car back.
Give me my car back
Right.
first.
It's my car.
It's not a ridiculous request. Anyway, so, what I walked away with the next day, I made up this phrase that I think is the perfect explanation to the protest that went on by Rav Gestetner's house. And that was, defund the police, deauthorize the Besden, and let the mob rule. It's very simple. That is what the liberals want in today's world. Defund the police, let the mob rule everything. And that is what they're trying to do. It's irrelevant what Shulchan Aruch says. It's irrelevant what the Besden says. We want this. So let the mob rule. Okay, getting to my last thing, because I really would like to end on a solution to the problem. If I believe I put together this 5-point plan a number of years ago, And I believe if this was instituted by Rabbanim in the frum world today, the situation of divorce would be reduced tremendously. First of all, point one is that every single class, senior class, should have someone come in to speak about shalom bayis. Even though they're only 17 or 18 years old, they should speak about, listen, we know you're going to get married in a couple of years. You're all going to have wonderful, beautiful, peaceful homes. But if you don't and you see a problem, this is how to go about resolving. This is the proper way that a Yid, that a Jew goes about handling the situation. And I believe that if one class is given, it could be once in the year, that people years later, if they have a situation where chas v'shalom they do get married and there is a difficult situation, they will remember that class that was given. And they will say, this is how to go about things. And even though in today's frum world, the girls are far more educated than the boys, because the boys are sitting and learning, and the girls are out there more in the world, especially if a guy goes into kollel. But nevertheless, it's very important, because the most of the guys learn in yeshiva. They learn kedushin, and they learn ksubas, and they learn gittin. They understand the fundamentals and the foundation of a Jewish marriage. This is not taught to the girls necessarily. What is being taught to them is how to be a good wife, how to have proper midos, so on and so forth. That's number one. Point number two is that no Rav should be Masada Kedushin without a third party. That third party, when a couple gets engaged, before they get married, they have to choose a third party, either a Rav or someone else who they believe is a fair, balanced person, and that this is someone, the days of a husband expecting a wife, oh, my husband knows everything, whatever he tells me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Those days are gone. Like I said before, today's world, especially in the Hamish world, where a guy is sitting and learning in kollel for a couple of years, the girls are more worldly and more educated out there in the world, in the secular world. And those days of a wife saying, I'll do whatever my husband tells me, those days are gone. And just like any boat in the ocean needs a navigator, a couple who is getting married need a navigator. It should be written down on paper. It should be signed by both the husband and wife. And they can choose to change their third party anytime they wish. They go out of town, they change values, whatever it is. They become more from, they become less from, whatever it is. But that third party must always be there, and it could be replaced by another third party as long as both of them agree. That is point number two. Point number three, no Besden should be allowed to hear a case for divorce without speaking to that third party. We heard the husband, we heard the wife, we want to hear what the third party. You've been involved in their marriage for a number of years. Please tell us your situation. Point number four is that no get should be given for 1 year. New York State used to have that law, I'm not sure whether they still do, that even if both parties want a divorce, come to full agreement, they had to sign the agreement, deposit it with the court, and the court would wait 1 year to give a divorce. If in the secular world the court recognizes that you don't just tear down a marriage and that you need time, then without question, in our society, in our values, we should understand. Like I said before, there's no get emergency. You're dealing with a couple that usually will have some children. Nobody's getting remarried within that first couple of months as soon as they get divorced. Anyways, if they understand that there is a 1 year wait for a get, maybe they'll be shalom bayis. Maybe they'll work something out. Even if not, it will lower the level of animosity and of fighting. There's no emergency. He's not withholding a get. There can't be a get for a year anyways. Let's work out the situation. It's a formulated, fixed set of parameters that forces people to understand that you need to work out the details first. The fifth point is that I believe that the value of a ksuba should be increased. The value of a ksuba in today's dollars is somewhere between $20,000 and $23,000. Though it's a substantial amount of money, it's not a life-changing amount of money. A lot of the Sephardim have done this, where they've increased it. If a ksuba had the value of $200,000 or $300,000, it would stop the husband, or certainly make him think 2 or 3 times before he did things that would break apart his marriage, knowing that he might have to pay that amount of money. And if a wife decides to go to secular court and somebody says, well, you'll lose your ksuba, you'll become a mereder, she said, big deal, so I'll lose $20,000. But we have a few $100,000 or $1 million or whatever it is, and our house is worth this, and so on and so forth. The heck with the $20,000. If you put a value in today's society, people value things when it comes to money. How much money comes out. Somebody said to me, yeah, but if you do that, what happens if you have a couple who really need to get divorced and they don't have money? No problem. The woman can always be meichelet. She can always say, listen, the two of them came to an agreement, they worked it out, there needs to be a divorce. She can always say, listen, give me $20,000 or the value of a ksuba or whatever it is, and work it out between them. And I think if the rabbanim in the community, and the different people in the community would implement this 5-point plan, doesn't favor men, it doesn't favor women. It's just an equal balance and puts a value on marriage.
Now, people watching this, if there's going to be a skanim or a rabbanim both watching this, say, you know what, we want to do something. There's organizations for everything. We're going to start right away. Can they reach you?
Sure. My email address is ultimate sale, ULTIMATE SALE1, ultimate sale 1, the number 1 at AOL.com. When people come to my wife and I to work out a situation, they'll ask us, well, whose side are you on? The husband's side or the wife's side? Our simple response is, we're on the children's side. The two of them produce children, we're on their side. And therefore, people in the community who believe they're do-gooders or askanim or whatever, and they're going to take this woman's son to learn at night in Avos Ubanim, you're enabling her to withhold the child from the father. The love between a father and a child is built up by the time they spend together and in doing things. And they don't need you to take him out to learn. Yes, if the father went off the derech and he's not interested in taking his son to learn, by all means. But don't stick your nose in. Don't go ahead and think you have big shoulders when the reality is you're not helping the situation, you're hurting the situation, and you're hurting the children.